Originally, I was just going to put the build in the description below. However, I know a lot of people prefer seeing it on screen this way as I kind of talk my way through it rather than just listing them. So I'll go ahead and explain this, and you can always use the timestamps to skip ahead to the matches if you just want to see that, or maybe you're not interested in wizard builds, you just want to see the gameplay and so forth. So from the previous build, we have swapped Lightning Nova, and we swapped that out for Black Hole. So the gameplay of this plays very different. We've obviously changed the essences that buffed Lightning Nova and put on ones that buff Black Hole. So I want to mention that I'm using 4-piece Grace, and this is because we have a couple of continual damage effects that will benefit from this. And this actually does surprisingly large damage and makes for solid burst for this build. Perhaps not quite as much burst as having Lightning Nova in, but still certainly enough to take down targets. On top of that, we're still using 2-piece Vithus, and that's just to extend the duration of beneficial effects on ourselves. So let's go ahead and take a look at the essences themselves. Now for the helm, we're still using Mask of Illusion, and this is going to allow us to basically teleport around and be a little bit sneaky and kind of position ourselves, set ourselves up for whether it be combos or just getting behind targets and so forth. You'll see kind of how I use this in the gameplay. In my strategy revolving around teleport for invisibility and black hold, I actually vary depending whether I'm on attack or defense. In fact, if I was using this build in something like a Rite of Exile or potentially even a Cursed Towers, I may play it differently or maybe not even use this build at all, to be honest, for a Cursed Towers. For the shoulders, we're using one of the newer essences, Crustclaw, and this is going to reduce the amount of continual damage that we take by 58%. Now, there's a ton of continual damage out there right now, okay? And kind of the biggest threat in general, at least for matches that get played in the bracket where I'm at, is dying to these damage over time components, whether it be from dots or legendary gem effects, whatever the case may be. This substantially reduces that damage and really dramatically increases your tankiness. Can you still sit in the middle of, say, 3 players at once in melee range? No, absolutely not. But this does help you out a tremendous amount, allowing you to get out and bandage more often. If you remember the gameplay from using Lightning Nova, I referenced a lot of times how I felt like playing Shimmerland Monk, right? You kind of dive in, blow all your cooldowns, hope to take out any targets, and then kind of cross your fingers and hope you get out. Well, with this build, you can actually get out fair more times, or a large more number of times there, and kind of get more engagements. And the engagements as well are kind of how you use this build is basically all around the engagements, the timings, and even the ability to swap your stances. So this becomes very important, and this actually is a really important essence. Believe it or not, a lot of people look at this and don't think it's needed or don't think it's the best option, but this is definitely important to this build, at least in my opinion. Now for the chest, we're running Norse the Hail Cursed, and Ice Armor is now going to reduce damage you take by 20%. Since we are swapping our Ice Armor and actually turning it into Storm Armor, we're losing that Absorption Shield. So what this is doing is actually reducing the damage we take by 20% while that's active, which is a pretty high amount of uptime. And another benefit here is that when we're running an Absorb Shield, once the Absorb amount runs out, well, that's it. If you're running this and still have Storm Armor active, well, you're always taking that 20% reduced damage. And as I mentioned, this build is all about your engagements. You're timing your engagements, similar to, say, to use Monk as another example, a more traditional Monk build, where you're playing around an engagement, then retreating and potentially waiting for cooldowns, going back in. So this essence as well, very important because it's going to give you 20% additional damage reduction on top of that buff that the range classes received not that long ago. For pants, we're going to continue to run the novel Castigation, and this has basically been a staple at this point. Same with the Riftcarver, and for the reason that just Arcane Torrent really just feels, like it should be in every build. It's just so powerful. It basically hit a button and it just does damage to anything around you, and large damage at that. So not much else to be said for that other than it just adds damage to one of your best abilities. As I mentioned here, we'll be using Riftcarver. So I'll cover that first, and that just makes Arcane Torrent what it is. Removes the channel effect from it, allows you to just kind of pop it, move around, deal damage. On top of that, what I'm using here is the Negation Blade, and this is going to absorb nearby enemy projectiles. Also has Black Hole cooldown reduction, and if you have this awakened, you get additional cooldown reduction. So it just adds a lot of kind of utility to this build. The absorption effect is powerful when you have something for it to use. Sometimes, obviously, that doesn't do anything. But in general, just having this additional 13.6% cooldown reduction, if you have it awakened, is a big boost as well. For offhands, we're obviously going to be running Heart of the Storm, just to turn our Ice Armor into the Storm Armor. And on top of that, what we were swapping out is Devouring Void. So we're putting Devouring Void in place of either the Siphon or the, I believe, Scour Cutter, whatever you may have had there, that was going to kind of buff your party speed or your own speed. Well, we're putting in Devouring Void because we're no longer using the Lightning Nova. This also makes Black Hole what you know it as in PvP. If you use Black Hole without this, you will not get a very good effect. So in general, I would not run this build without this. You could run the build without the Negation Blade in the main hand, but running the build without Devouring Void really isn't going to do much for you because you're just going to lose a ton of that utility. And what I mean by that is when I cast a Black Hole here, you're going to see it kind of creep forward. And this is what's going to kind of suck the players in and occupy them, keep them CC'd. So you really want to have that. For Paragon stance, I have messed around with Executioner. I don't like it so much for this. In fact, my win rate really tanked when I was running Executioner with this build. In general, I like Gladiator for this build. You are very fragile, having the ability to get that cheat death, as well as the Trapper, because you have teleport, you have the invisibility, and even if they know where you're going, sometimes just that split second or the reaction time of teleporting somewhere, they kind of chase you if they see you, and maybe they don't notice a trap or anything like that. So in general, I just find Gladiator the better choice for this. And I can't stress it enough, but you want to be comfortable with your stances, okay? This is very important to this build. There are some builds where, okay, the stances can be a benefit, but maybe they're not a huge boost, but this build definitely benefits from this. So when you switch into the offensive stance, you're going to get an increased critical hit chance. After the duration ends, you will keep part of this critical hit chance. So if you teleport in and basically ambush somebody, right, and just start unloading on them, you can move into this stance and get an additional critical hit chance, have the potential to burst something down. And the other stance as well, when you activate this, and you probably can't see it, I'm sorry, but it says, upon activation, all nearby enemies are stunned for 3 seconds. Your primary attacks now reduce the movement speed of enemies that are hit by 40%. Players are reduced to 20. Now, the second part of that, the movement speed reduction, is far less important than that AoE stun. That AoE stun has a fairly small range, but once you kind of get familiar or comfortable with it, it's very valuable. You can sneak in with the teleport at times, stun everything with the stance change, and then follow up the Black Hole. So make sure that you're comfortable with this. Very important to this build. I think that this build has a much higher skill ceiling. Overall, I think it's actually the stronger build, probably the strongest build that I've seen from a wizard at this point, and it's just because of its ability to kind of control objectives. On defense, you can throw your Black Hole into the objective kind of repeatedly. It's also very effective against Necros, which are just abundant, right? Having the Black Hole and the stance change are 2 ways that you can follow up when they come out of borrowed time, essentially kind of hindering their ability to kind of be productive after that goes off. So go ahead and take a look at some of the gameplay. The first match is attack, the second match is defense, and I'll leave timestamps for both of those. Enjoy. Welcome back, everyone. Looks like we got a match on attack. So I'm using a Black Hole build. Essentially, this swaps out Lightning Nova for Black Hole, and then you transform some of the essences for Lightning Nova into those for Black Hole. Pretty much makes sense. I'll leave it in the link, or excuse me, I'll leave it in the description below. You can take a look if you want. This may be the last PvP build that I show on Wizard, at least for this go-around. I'd like to just cover some other content, perhaps do something for Conqueror, but something that doesn't have resonance as a factor. This build is also kind of a mid to high resonance build, so you do have some flexibility here. I don't have any experience with this on free-to-play or low reso, but as always, let me know if you've tried it or want to try it and how it works for you. The idea here is that it really synergizes well with your stance change. So when I go into my defensive stance, it's going to stun everything. So I'm going to try to go in here and basically sneak up on them, get a stun, and from there, I'm going to go ahead and throw the Black Hole out and just use that to kind of CC, occupy them, do as much as I can, and essentially pop everything else while retreating and hopefully getting a heal off as well. Now, I didn't manage to get the change into the stance. It got knocked back. So I still have that, but I can do it again this time. And what I'm going to do here is pop kind of my AoE beforehand. Oh, it looks like my stance did go off. I'm sorry. It's on 2-second cooldown here. So there I can pop it and use it to kind of increase my critical hit chance and just push forward for some extra damage. So I'm going to dodge the Necro there. Now I can get on them. Black Hole is really good for taking Necros out of their borrowed time. As you can see there, with the number of Necros that there are, it's just really powerful. So if you're facing a lot of Necros, I prefer this build. The other build works really well when you're high resonance in terms of having Lightning Nova, and that's just because you can kind of drop people before they get to things like the objective. I also like to throw the black hole out. It has a relatively short cooldown, so I can throw it onto oncomers and not worry too much. I can probably get it back up, especially if I use my stun and just kind of buy time for myself. So now I'm stuck in defensive stance. I like to get behind them here, or towards their spawn, I should say, and just stall them if possible. In fact, I actually get a kill doing that. So I'm going to try to heal. They run by me, which is great. Now I'm going to be able to change stances again, so I can use this in 5 seconds. So I'm going to throw my black hole out early just to trap them coming, and it at least has prevented them from coming up. And I do finally go down here, but we are pushing both sides, which is great to see in the beginning, right? We want to get out here with as few deaths as possible. Now I'm in my defensive stance, so I'm going to get increased critical hit chance, so I'll go ahead and just swap as soon as possible and move over to the other side. I'm stuck behind a wall there. And now I'm really trying to always be in the attacker stance, and that's so that I can use the swap to defensive stance as a stun. Just getting knocked back repeatedly by anything that comes on my screen. So plenty of people to deal with a barb here. So I'm actually going to come over this direction and just try to stall them. I thought I was behind them. I'm not even sure it killed me. I'll have to look at the replay there. But continuing to push forward. The other side could use some attention here. Going to have to teleport over that just to get out. Now I'm going to run away from that Necro for now. They're going to tick when the borrowed time comes up until they get a kill. So I can kind of let them take some damage. I don't have to engage them. A lot of people linger on a target for a really long time. At this point I can just go in and finish them off if they haven't been. Now I can kind of get up to the objective. I'm going to go into my attacker stance, even though it's a little early and I'm not going to get full benefit. I just want to get the cooldown for the defensive stance ticking. Immediately throwing out a black hole, and again, just to kind of slow snare, make something go around. Don't always have to land it on a target. You can use it as a decoy, so to speak. Go down, but I do manage to get some damage output myself and just prevent them from getting to the idol. That's what this is all about on attacker at this point. Getting these idols as far as possible. Once we get at the very end, we need to prevent them from getting in it at all. But right now, we just need to prevent them from slowing it down. Just get that objective to the end. So now I have my stun. I will try to get there in invis. Manage a stun here. Follow it up with a black hole. And this should be a pretty easy finish. I get interrupted yet again. Push them off, and we have somebody coming up to the objective. So my plan did not work as I wanted, but we are kind of stuck here, and we're probably getting close to the number of kills before we're about to lose here. So I see the enemy team rotating. I'm actually going to head over to the right side this time. Looks like we're clearing it out, and this is going to allow me to kind of cut them off in a perfect situation as they come over in this direction. Throw a black hole out and just, again, stalling, all right? I'm not going to win this fight, but I can stall. Maybe I get a kill. Just slow them down. Don't let them get to the objective. My team regroups on the objective. That idol pushes all of the way in. So that is the benefit of getting, whether it be to the spawn or just this location. I was not going there to spawn camp. Okay, I was just going there to prevent them from moving past it. And black hole, super effective for that, right? Because you can catch everybody in it. We have somebody who wants to play here. So I will certainly go there and take the one-on-one. They're retreating. So again, I can go and use my stun if I can pop everything up here. I'm just permanently CC'd in this match, but nonetheless, we're able to pull off a victory. Can't even use a stance change, which is super fast. I'm just CC'd the second I do anything, but nonetheless, we get a win on attack. And as always, thanks for taking the time to watch, and have a great day. All right, it took 7 games, but we've managed to get one on defense that we can show. And again, same build. However, I actually really like the build on defense as well for different reasons. You can basically just always throw your black hole into the objective, right? In order for the team on the other side to progress that objective, they have to be in it, which means that you can kind of use your invisibility, to get up to the objective, throw the black hole, and either catch somebody in it or push them back, just continually stalling them over and over. And whether you reach the kill count or the timer, it doesn't much matter, right? So we're going to stay here and try to utilize some of this at the choke. And again, if I can sneak by and get behind them, Black Hole and the stance change become really effective. So they're fairly clumped up there. I'm going to try to get in with my invisibility. You see I managed to get 3 players in there while occupying, it looks like 5 or 6 of the players on their team. Now I use the stance change. I will never make it out of here. I'm going to try to get as far away as possible, just to see if the enemy team is going to bring any players to drag with me. Now, they don't, and I actually get hit by somebody's Starfire Shard, which is just a gem with a whole bunch of problems on its own. It can actually proc after you resurrect when the other player is dead, and a whole bunch of other things, including the very laggy knockback effect that it has, that has had a couple of hotfixes at this point. So, again, just waiting for an opportunity as they come near the choke here, using invisibility to hopefully sneak up, although there's just damage being thrown everywhere. And again, just getting into the back line, getting on players that are bandaging, being a disruption. Doesn't matter if I die, as long as the enemy team doesn't make it out of here or is very hindered or delayed in doing so. And my team can kind of hold the choke down while I go and get kills, disrupt it. Now they've finally broken through, so we're going to have to kind of change things up. And at this point, I'm going to want to start playing towards that objective. This side over here is going to get activated, and I will just sneak up there, throw a Black Hole in, do whatever I can, follow that up with my stance change, and now I'm just going to kind of kite around, try to stay alive, fortunately clear it out there. So heal up. I will use my stance change whenever possible if I'm in the attack stance, just to get the cooldown going. And sometimes it bugs out, so I use my stance change, but it's not reflected here. And sometimes this cooldown just doesn't reflect. I actually managed to use it there, so it may not have gone off that first time, but it can do exactly what I was describing. You can use it, have it be on cooldown, and it doesn't always show on the tooltip there. So keep that in mind. You may have to kind of time it in your head, or just use it at a point where you know it's in the opposite stance and so forth. You use one invisibility to get over there, another to get there, and then come from behind. And at this point, I can leave that Necro. They will be tipping from the borrowed time. Managed to get them away from the Crusader, which is great. Now I'm going to ditch that other Necro for the same reason, right? They've got the borrowed time ticking. So I don't need to be near them. I can just kind of let that tick. They're going to try to bandage at this point, so I can get on them there. And drawing the Whale Wizard away, which is fine as well. Drawing them off of that idol and into me towards their spawn, and the other side doing just fine at the moment. So I know that they've got the whale on the left when I res up here, so I'm going to head back to that side and hopefully get there with some teammates before they go down and try to help deal with this. In fact, my team looks like they managed to pretty much clear it out and come from behind. And again, I know that that Necro is playing borrowed time. I need somebody in the idol. I was trying to get in there myself just to delay it as it's moving forward here. But fortunately, the res timers and the enemy team heard enough that they can't stay in it either. This has kind of turned into a brawl, which is entertaining none the least, at least to play in it. Again, I will go back to that same side. And it looks like it's just a giant clash at this point. So I'm going to preemptively pop my damage. Head down here as I see a runner there. Make sure that the objective is covered. And I can just follow up with Black Hole here. Very effective for borrowed time, cheat death, anything like that where you know the target's going to be stunned. And at this point, I'm just kind of doing whatever damage I can to the backline. I do have a teleport and a stance change here that I can utilize. Use the stance change, follow it up with Black Hole, and that should clear them out there. Okay, that was not the player I expected to get it. I was popping that to see if either myself or the Necro on my team needed it as they were dotted, but apparently the Crusader decided they needed it more than anybody. And just throwing a Black Hole to stall. That Necro is really more of a support Necro with the build, so I don't have to worry about an engage there. Now that they have a second player, going to just try to eat this Conjuration of Light. And again, team doing a great job at stalling the other side when I am on a side by myself or with limited numbers. And even when I go down, my team's doing a great job of rotating over and covering throw that black hole where my teammate is, because surely the barb is going to come back in the direction towards either my teammate or myself. Managed to capture them. And we've actually got them pinned back at their spawn again, so I have a stance change that I can use. Won't matter as they're in borrowed time. And I can't say it enough. This black hole, when you're playing against Necros, easily the preferred build, at least between this and the Lightning Nova. Lightning Nova, if you're not facing Necros, just the sheer damage that adds to that build and the potential you have, especially if you're a higher resonance player than the other players in the match, very, very strong. Just has the ability to take down 5-6 players at once. It almost kind of broken AoE non-targeted damage. Need to time this. Should have my stun here. Managed to get a stun off before they wraith, and that will work just as effective as black hole would. Need a little bit of support here from my team, so just making sure that I don't get caught out. Here's a banner from the enemy. That will make easy work of that, as I can stun them without any immunity and just drop them in the duration there. At this point, the enemy has left the objective, so I'll just bandage right next to it. Just kind of lingering around, although this match is essentially over. See the aura coming near me, and that's kind of my cue to throw a black hole. And we just need a couple of kills here, so I'm going to go over to the other side that has more of the players on my team. Just because it doesn't matter if the other side pushes at this point. We're really just playing for a couple of kills to finish the match. And we should do it here. And there it is. So as you can see, really just throwing black holes out mainly in the objective or using teleport to be invisible, get just outside of the objective and throwing them back in. Makes this build really, really strong on defense for that exact reason. So I hope you enjoyed as always. Thanks for taking the time to watch and have a great day.